All right. Moving on, our next talk this afternoon is from Isaac Dickens. Please and minutes. Hello, everyone. My name is Isaac Dickus. I am an undergraduate researcher at Dr. Christopher Klaus's lab, and today I'll be going over my summer project, characterization of a tamoxifen-induced RAS-backed mouse model. So, cancer cachexia. What is it? Well, it's defined as the involuntary loss of skeletal muscle, with or without the loss of adipose tissue. This is a disease that sees an energy imbalance of the body, where catabolism, or breaking down, is much more prevalent than anabolism, or building up. This disease is not uniform amongst different kinds of cancer. So you can see with these graphs that certain cancers such as pancreatic cancer or gastroesophageal cancer are much more prevalent than in other cancers such as prostate cancer or breast cancer. And typically, but not universally, within these more prevalent cancers, the weight loss observed is also more severe. My lab is mainly focused on the phenomenon that happens between cancer cachexia and immune checkpoint inhibitors, or ICIs for short. The phenomenon goes that these ICIs are observed to have an increased drug clearance in patients with cancer cachexia. And the mechanism for why this phenomenon happens is currently under investigation. So to investigate this phenomenon further, we integrated a transgenic mouse model to help further study this phenomenon for future studies. And so this transgenic mouse model relies on three main aspects: tamoxifen, Cre-recombinase, and KRAS G12V. So what are these? Well, KRAS G12V and Cre-recombinase are transgenes that are implemented into the mouse embryo. And normally within this transgenic mouse model, Cre-recombinase is expressed as an enzyme that remains in the cytoplasm but in an inactive form. So what tamoxifen does is that it's administered, and once it goes inside the cell, it activates Cre-recombinase and allows it to be translocated from the cytoplasm into the nucleus. So once this Cre is active and is in the nucleus, it looks for a LOX-gated stop codon, which is another transgenic mouse element in this model. So once it finds this LOX-gated stop codon, it cuts out the stop codon, so that whatever is beyond the stop codon can be expressed. In this case, it's KRAS G12V. And so once this KRAS G12V is a oncogenic KRAS mutation, which in this model leads to pancreatic cancer. And the conditions of this pancreatic cancer in this model leads to cancer cachexia. And so why this specific mouse model? Well, this specific mouse model was integrated from Dr. Cruz Monserrati's lab due to both its high accessibility and high cachectic progression shown in preliminary data. And so this chart is preliminary data. This is relative body weight. So 100, you can see here, is the mice body weight at day 0, in which day 0 is the date that these mice are initially dosed with tamoxifen. And so we can see that in the top two groups, the black and the pink, we can see that with these control mice, their body weights stay relatively the same relative to their initial body weight. However, with the bottom two groups, the teal and the purple, which are mice with this transgenic mouse model, we can see that their body weight declines rapidly, so that by day 12, they lost nearly 20% of their total body weight. This is dramatic and drastic decrease from the control to the experimental group in the transgenic mouse model. And so my main contribution over the summer was to help characterize this mouse model in the lab for future studies. And so after troubleshooting genotyping intensely over the past spring, an eligible sample pool of mice were found. And of these sample pools, 4 cohorts were made, 3 for controls and 1 for one experimental group. And so of these cohorts, the top 3 controls, they're missing one or multiple of the main aspects that makes up the transgenic mouse model's mechanism, that being tamoxifen, KRAS G12V, or Cre recombinase. So if they're missing even one or multiple of these aspects, then we do not expect these mice to develop cancer cachexia. However, with mice in the experimental group, we see that they have both transgenes and are given tamoxifen. So therefore, we can expect in the study that the experimental cohort would be the only ones to manifest cancer cachexia. So the planning for the study. So the mice were orally gavaged with tamoxifen, which was 50 micrograms per mouse per day, or vehicle depending on the cohort, for 5 days. So days 0 through 4, with body weights taken every other day. And the plan was to sacrifice these mice 13 days after initial tamoxifen dose, or day 12. However, by day 12, the experimental cohort was not losing weight as expected. So our recourse was to redose the mice with 10 times the amount of tamoxifen, or 500 micrograms per mouse per day, as the benefits of increasing this dose outweighed the risks in our minds. And so on the timeline here, we can see day 0 as our initial tamoxifen dosage. Day 12 was the original sacrifice date. Day 16 was when we first dosed these mice with the 10 times higher tamoxifen dosage. And day 28 is the sacrifice date. And so getting onto the data here, this is relative body weight. This is much like the preliminary data slide shown before, only that 100 in this case is now 1.0. So going over the group here, the top three, the blue, the red, and the purple, are all different varieties of controls, while the black group here is our experimental group. So we can see as the groups progress, and this is on average, their average body weight, as they progress onto the red dotted line, which is the original sacrifice date, their body weights do not drop at all compared to their initial body weight. However, it's when these groups progress past the blue dotted line, which was when these mice were redosed with 10 times the amount of tamoxifen, we see that while the control cohorts remain at or above their initial body weight, we see that the black experimental group dropped below, on average, from their initial body weight, which was as expected. However, this was not consistent among all the individuals in the cohort. So of the experimental cohort, there's 5 mice. One of the mice lost weight at a very rapid pace. 2 of the mice lost weight but at a much slower pace, and 2 of the mice did not lose body weight at all relative to their initial body weight. Moving on to tissue data here. This was all normalized by dividing each measurement by initial body weight, because all these mice had different ages. So this was a way to normalize the data. And so while we can see that there is a difference between the experimental group and one of the controls heavily with the fat tissue, we can see with the other 3 measurements, which are all standardized measurements of skeletal muscle, we do not see a difference between the experimental group and the control cohorts. So under these parameters of inconsistent body weight loss among the individuals in the experimental cohort, and the lack of skeletal muscle difference between the experimental cohort and the controls, from this limited sample data, there is inconclusive evidence on if the experimental cohort manifested cachexia or not. So the future work for this project would be to further troubleshoot for another characterization study to get more conclusive evidence of cancer cachexia manifesting in this model. So one would be to ensure each mice receives the same dose through proper tamoxifen suspension. Another would be enlarging the sample size to avoid sampling bias. Another would be extending the time between initial dosage and sacrifice, although ethical guidelines would need to be followed very closely. Finally, closing the age disparity between the cohorts could strengthen the data. Overall, if more conclusive data of cancer cachexia manifesting in this model arises, then a future pharmacokinetic study would observe the effects of eyesight clearance within this mouse model. Finally, I would like to thank the following people on this slide, and the Dr. Kost Phelps lab, especially Justin Thomas, who is my main graduate supervisor over this project, and all the CREATES fellows, Dr. Cruz Monserrati's lab, and the James Comprehensive Cancer Center for contributing heavily to this project, allowing me to do this today. Thank you.
All right, time for some questions.
No, these mice will develop pancreatic cancer within this model, but they start the study without cancer. Normally. Yes. Yeah, in the experimental cohort.
And then when you mentioned age disparity, do you see cachexia more in younger or older mice?
Oh, that was interesting because the mice that I mentioned in the individuals, that was the one that lost body weight rapidly was the youngest mice in that cohort, while the other mice that either lost weight at a much slower pace or remained at their initial body weight were older. So I cannot fully say the effects of age and cancer cachexia confidently, but that was just something interesting I'd like to know. Oh.
Go ahead. Nick.
Kind of going off that question, I understand the model correctly. We're using tamoxifen for wound stocking, and we're expressing KRAS, and we're wearing the nose.
No. So with this specific model, this uses a only in this model is a specific elastase promoter that is this only cells with this specific elastase promoter would have to create recombinase to develop pancreatic cancer. Not the mice, not the other cells in the body should have to experience this because of this specific promoter.
Okay, now working off of the blood report, do you see any pathology IgG level?
I have not studied that, but it would be something interesting to know.
Not yet studied it.
Yeah.
Yet studied.
Oh yeah. So I was just gonna ask if do you think that you had initially dosed the mice with 500 micrograms of amoxicillin? Do you think that it was just like you had to sacrifice it too soon after you started that high dose? That's the reason you didn't see the decrease in weight, or because you were just
It's hard to say for sure, but if anything, I would have expected increased, like expedited body weight loss, and we saw that in one individual. But on average, they would give more tamoxifen because they were dosed with 10 times a weaker tamoxifen initially. But I bet if we dosed them with that 10 times amount of tamoxifen initially, I'm sure we would have saw that quicker. But I can't say for certain, because if anything, they would have more tamoxifen in their system, but I'm not sure.
Did you look at the experimental mice to see if they had pancreatic cancer?
Yes, or why we were sacrificing them. They did have pancreatic tumors. Yes.
Okay. We kind of probably have to move on, I'm afraid.
Huh?
But Isaac will be on later and answer more questions.
I'll be here all night.
Questions.